Let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself. Have you ever stopped talking to a woman, and instead of her chasing you, apologizing, or blowing up your phone, she just went quiet, not cold, not angry, just still? And that silence messed with you more than any argument ever could, because in that moment, your mind starts racing. Did I mess up? Does she not care? Should I text her? Am I losing her right now? And here's the part most men don't understand, that silence isn't indifference, it's processing. I'm saying this as a woman who has watched this dynamic unfold over and over again. In relationships, dating, marriages, even friendships. When communication stops, men often assume women react emotionally first. But emotionally intelligent women don't. They pause. And that pause is where everything shifts. You see, when you stop talking to her, you think the power is in the silence itself. You think it's about absence, about withdrawal, about doing nothing. But that's not what's actually happening on her side. What's happening is evaluation. She's not asking, how do I get him back? She's asking, how do I feel when he's not here? And that question is far more dangerous or powerful than you realize. This is where a lot of men sabotage themselves, not because they lack confidence, not because they're unattractive, but because they misunderstand female emotional regulation. Women don't always react outwardly when something shifts. We internalize first. We replay moments. We observe patterns. We notice how our body feels when the noise stops. Do we feel relief? Do we feel curiosity? Do we feel anxiety? Or peace? And here's the uncomfortable truth most men aren't told. How she feels in your absence tells her more about you than anything you've ever said. That's why this moment matters. Not because silence is a tactic, not because ignoring someone works, but because silence reveals structure. It reveals whether your presence brought safety or pressure, whether your attention felt grounding or overwhelming, whether you were adding to her life or quietly draining it. And I know some of you listening right now are struggling. You're trying to be better, more open, more available. You don't want to play games, you just don't want to lose her either. So when communication breaks, your instinct is to fix, to explain, to over-clarify, to reach. But what if I told you that the most attractive thing in this moment is not pursuit, but self-containment? That's what this video is really about, not making her chase, not manipulation, not power games. It's about understanding what actually shifts inside a woman when you stop talking, and why the men who remain grounded during that pause are the ones she ends up respecting the most. And it starts with something most men completely misunderstand. She doesn't panic, she pauses, and that's where most men get it wrong. Let me ask you a question. When you stop talking to a woman, do you assume she immediately feels rejected? Or do you assume she starts missing you right away? Because neither of those is usually true. Here's a simple but powerful reality. Most emotionally mature women don't panic when communication stops. They pause. Let me show you what that looks like. Imagine this scenario. You've been talking consistently. Good conversations, some emotional depth, maybe a bit of flirting. Then one day the rhythm changes. Messages slow down. You decide to pull back too. No drama, no explanation. From your side, it feels tense, like something unfinished. From her side, it feels quiet. And in that quiet, she doesn't immediately think about you. She thinks about herself. She notices how her body feels waking up without that notification. She notices whether her mood drops or stabilizes. She notices whether she feels pulled or relieved. This is the part most men miss. Women don't always process attraction through urgency. We process it through emotional contrast. And silence creates contrast. Not the kind that screams, the kind that whispers. Psychologically, when stimulation is removed, the brain does something interesting. It begins to scan for meaning, not in the other person, but internally. She asks herself questions like, did I feel seen with him or just entertained? Did I feel calm or slightly on edge? Did I enjoy the connection or the validation? And here's the uncomfortable insight. If your presence was grounded, calm, and self-contained, silence amplifies your value. If your presence was anxious, performative, or approval-seeking, silence brings relief. This is why some men disappear and become unforgettable, and others disappear and are barely noticed. It's not about how often you talked, it's about how you made her feel while you were there. So, what's the mindset shift here? Stop viewing silence as something you're doing to her, and start seeing it as something that reveals the truth. You don't need to fill the gap. You don't need to rush clarity. You don't need to force momentum. Your job is to stay centered. Because when a woman senses that you are emotionally stable, even without constant contact, something subtle happens inside her. She starts wondering, why doesn't his silence feel heavy? Why do I feel curious instead of dismissed? Why does this space feel intentional? And that curiosity is not about control, it's about respect. Now here's the question I want you to sit with, because it leads directly into the next section. When you go quiet, does she feel abandoned, or does she feel space to reflect? Because the answer to that determines everything that comes next. Silence forces reflection, not chase. Let me ask you something important, and I want you to really think before answering. When you stop talking to a woman, are you secretly hoping she'll chase you? Because if that's the expectation, you're already misunderstanding what silence actually does. Silence doesn't trigger pursuit first. It triggers reflection, and reflection is far more powerful. Let me walk you into a situation most men recognize. You stop texting her. A day passes, then two. No dramatic message from her. No, "Are you okay?" No emotional reaction. And instead of feeling powerful, you start feeling uneasy. That's because men often associate attraction with visible response, effort, reassurance, engagement. But women don't process attraction that way. When communication stops, a woman's first instinct isn't to reach outward, it's to look inward. She doesn't think, "How do I get him back?" She thinks, "What just changed? And how do I feel about it?" This is where silence becomes psychologically revealing. When you're constantly present, talking, explaining, engaging, she doesn't need to evaluate anything. The connection stays on autopilot. But when you remove yourself calmly without drama, you interrupt the pattern, and the human brain hates unfinished emotional loops. Her mind starts revisiting moments, the way you spoke, how you listened, how you handled tension, whether you felt grounded or reactive, not consciously at first, subtly. And here's the key insight most men don't hear. Women don't chase clarity. They chase emotional consistency. So if your silence feels chaotic, confusing, or cold, she doesn't lean in. She pulls away. But if your silence feels neutral, stable, almost intentional, something shifts. She begins to wonder, why doesn't this feel like rejection? Why don't I feel anxious? Just aware. Why does his absence feel different from others? This isn't manipulation. This is emotional intelligence. You see, emotionally healthy women don't respond well to pressure. They respond to emotional safety. And paradoxically, emotional safety is often felt more clearly when someone is not constantly reaching. Silence gives her room to measure. Does she miss you or the attention? Does she feel drawn or just unused to the gap? Does she want reconnection or closure? And that distinction matters. Because when a woman reaches out after a period of silence, it's rarely impulsive. It's intentional. And intention is where attraction deepens. So what's the mindset shift for you as a man? Stop waiting for her to chase. That's ego talking. Instead, ask yourself, does my presence feel calm enough that my absence invites reflection instead of relief? That's the real test. Silence isn't about disappearing. It's about not filling space with insecurity. If you can hold that space without anxiety, without resentment, without needing validation, something changes in how she perceives you. She doesn't feel ignored, she feels given space, and space is where desire clarifies. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable, and this leads us straight into the next section. If silence reveals reflection, why do some men panic and overtalk the moment they feel distance? Because the truth is, silence doesn't expose her emotions first, it exposes yours, and that's what we're going to talk about next. The hard truth: why some men talk too much when they're afraid. Let me say this gently, because it matters. Most men don't lose women because they're not interesting enough. They lose women because they get louder when they should get steadier. Now, before you react, stay with me. This isn't an attack. It's an invitation to awareness. Here's the pattern I've seen again and again. A man senses distance, replies slow, energy shifts, and suddenly he starts doing more explaining, more checking in, more emotional dumping disguised as communication, more words with less grounding. From his perspective, he's being honest. He's trying to fix things. He's trying to show care. But from her perspective, it feels like pressure. Not because she doesn't like him, but because his emotional center just moved outside himself. And women feel that instantly. Here's the hard truth most men are never told. When you talk too much in moments of uncertainty, it signals fear, not depth. That doesn't mean vulnerability is wrong. It means unregulated vulnerability creates imbalance. Emotionally intelligent women aren't drawn to men who never feel doubt. They're drawn to men who can feel doubt without collapsing into it. Let me give you a simple scenario. You stop talking. She goes quiet. You start replaying everything. Instead of sitting with the discomfort, you reach out to clarify, to explain, to emotionally preempt rejection. You tell yourself you're being mature. But what you're actually doing is trying to control the outcome, and control kills polarity. This is where the wake-up call comes in, calmly, honestly. If silence makes you anxious, it's not her distance you're reacting to. It's your own lack of internal grounding. That's not a character flaw, that's a growth point. Women are naturally attuned to emotional regulation. When a man stays calm in uncertainty, it communicates strength without dominance. But when he over-communicates to soothe himself, something subtle breaks. She doesn't think he cares. She thinks he needs this to go a certain way. And need, even emotional need, shifts attraction. Now here's the reframe that changes everything. Instead of asking, how do I make her respond? Ask, can I stay emotionally steady even if she doesn't? That's leadership, not control, not detachment. Leadership. It's the difference between expressing feelings and using feelings to seek reassurance. One builds respect, the other quietly erodes it. And let me be clear, silence doesn't mean punishment. It doesn't mean withdrawal. It means self-trust. When you trust yourself, you don't need to rush clarity. You don't need to narrate your worth. You don't need to chase emotional resolution. You allow space because you can handle whatever comes next. And women feel that as safety. Now here's the question I want to leave you with, because it leads directly into the next section. When she feels distance, does she feel pulled to test you or relieved that the pressure stopped? Because sometimes what looks like her pulling away is actually her watching to see who you become in the space, and that's where the real shift begins. What her emotional distance is really testing. Let me ask you something, and this one might feel uncomfortable if you've never heard it said out loud. When a woman creates emotional distance, do you assume she's losing interest? Because most of the time, that distance isn't an ending. It's a test of stability. Not a conscious one, not a manipulative one, but an emotional one. Let me explain. Women don't test men with words first. They test men with space. They pull back slightly and watch what happens, not to control you, but to understand you. Think about everyday situations you've lived through. You don't text first for a day. She doesn't either. The rhythm shifts. She notices how you respond to the gap. Do you rush to fill it? Do you go cold and resentful? Do you suddenly change your tone? Or do you remain the same man you were when things felt secure? This is the part most men misunderstand. Her distance isn't asking, will he chase me? It's asking, does he stay grounded when the emotional temperature changes? Because emotional safety isn't proven during connection. It's proven during uncertainty. Here's a real-life example many men recognize. A woman stops sharing as much. She's polite, but less open. She listens more than she talks. From your side, it feels like something is slipping. From her side, she's watching. Does he respect the shift? Does he stay present without pushing? Does he still feel solid? Or does he unravel? This isn't about games. It's about compatibility. Women who are emotionally aware are constantly sensing, can I relax around this man, even when things aren't perfect? Because long-term attraction doesn't come from intensity. It comes from consistency. Now here's the important mindset shift. Instead of seeing her distance as rejection, see it as information. It's feedback about how safe the connection feels. And safety doesn't mean predictability. It means emotional reliability. The men who pass this moment don't try to win it. They allow it. They don't change their personality. They don't punish with silence. They don't overperform emotionally. They stay respectful. They stay centered. They stay self-directed. And something interesting happens when you do that. Her distance either dissolves naturally or clarifies that the connection wasn't aligned. Both outcomes are a win. Because attraction that requires you to abandon yourself isn't attraction, it's tension. Here's another everyday scenario. You're at work, you're focused, your life continues. You don't disappear, but you don't hover. When she reaches out again, your tone is calm, familiar, unchanged, and that consistency sends a powerful message. I'm not dependent on constant emotional validation to stay stable. That's not cold. That's mature. And maturity is deeply attractive to women who are tired of emotional chaos. Now, here's the question that bridges us into the final section. If emotional distance is testing your stability, what kind of presence actually deepens desire when connection resumes? Because the answer isn't more effort, it's something far quieter and far more powerful. Why the right response isn't more effort, it's better presence. Let me ask you something, and answer it honestly. When she starts to come back, when the distance softens, when the conversation resumes, do you feel the urge to prove something? To show more interest, to be extra attentive, to make sure she knows you care? That instinct is understandable. But here's the truth most men never hear. Desire doesn't grow from increased effort. It grows from improved presence. Let me explain what that means in real life. Think about the moments when a woman feels most drawn to a man. It's rarely when he's trying hard. It's when he's fully there, not anxious, not performing, not trying to secure the outcome, just present. Imagine this scenario. After a period of distance, she messages you. Nothing dramatic, just something simple. If you respond with overenthusiasm, long explanations, emotional reassurance, it subtly shifts the dynamic back into imbalance. Not because you're wrong, but because you're leading from fear instead of self-trust. Now imagine the alternative. You respond warmly, but without urgency. You're engaged, but not overinvested. You're interested, but still grounded in your own life. Your tone hasn't changed, and that's what catches her attention. Because consistency communicates confidence. Presence communicates safety. And safety is where attraction deepens. Here's something women feel but don't often say. I'm drawn to men who don't need the moment to go a certain way. When a man doesn't rush to lock things down emotionally, it creates space for desire to expand naturally. This isn't about withholding, it's about self-respect. Better presence means listening without interrupting, responding without overcorrecting, engaging without losing your center. It's the difference between, I hope this works, and I'll be okay either way. And that second energy is incredibly grounding. In everyday life, this looks like you're still focused at work, you still prioritize your routines, you still speak calmly, you don't punish distance, and you don't reward it with desperation. You remain available, not accessible. There's a difference. Available means open. Accessible means emotionally on call. Women don't want men who disappear. They also don't want men who orbit. They want men who stand. And when you stand, quietly, steadily, something shifts. She doesn't feel chased. She feels chosen. Not because you tried harder, but because you stayed whole. Now let me leave you with the final question. One that leads perfectly into the conclusion. If attraction grows when you stay centered, what happens when you stop trying to manage her emotions and start leading your own? Because the moment you do that, you don't just change how she sees you, you change how you see yourself. Let me leave you with one controversial truth, and I want you to sit with it, not react to it. Most women don't lose attraction when a man stops talking. They lose attraction when he loses himself trying to be understood. Silence doesn't scare emotionally intelligent women. Emotional instability does. What you've learned here isn't about pulling away, disappearing, or playing roles. It's about something far deeper. It's about becoming the kind of man whose presence feels steady, even when he's quiet. The kind of man who doesn't need constant reassurance to feel secure. The kind of man who can allow space without turning it into a battlefield in his mind. And I'm saying this to you, woman to man, honestly and calmly. You don't need to chase clarity to be worthy of connection. You don't need to explain yourself into being chosen. You don't need to prove your value when things feel uncertain. The moment you stop trying to manage her emotions and start leading your own is the moment your energy shifts, and women feel that shift immediately. If this video made you reflect, even a little, I want you to comment below. Tell me what you've experienced when communication stopped. Tell me what silence brought up for you. I read those stories, and I respond because this conversation matters. I'll leave you with this thought. A man who is at peace with uncertainty becomes unforgettable because he no longer asks to be chosen. Let that sit with you.